So welcome back to my channel. This is Gamer Dom, and time for some more ramblings. Lots of exciting things have been going on this week in World of Tanks. First up, something which I think will divide opinion in a big way is some changes being tested on the super test of the Japanese super obese tanks. So this has been again one of those bitches that you get from all the Super Unicum players out there about the fact that the Type 5 and the Type 4 are just too good, shouldn't be allowed because there's no skill involved in firing just HE, and they're too armoured and blah 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 blah. So as usual, Wargaming have listened to them, and they're looking at, to be honest, not sizable changes, reducing a couple of sections around these sort of viewports on the front of the Type 5 Heavy and also the front of the Type 4 Heavy by 10mm, so that brings them down from 20mm here, 280 to 260 on the Type 5, 280 to 270 on this one, and then on the Type 4 it's 260 to 240 and 260 to 250. So is that going to make a huge amount of difference? I don't know. But it says their maneuverability and speed will be adjusted, so they're a bit better than the mouse. Okay, because the problem was apparently the frontal armor of these vehicles, unlike things like the mouse, which is not at all OP, is it, Wargaming? The front of the German tanks have weak spots, whereas apparently these Japanese didn't. So they could only be penned with premium ammo, so they're going to have a little nerfing. I didn't think Wargaming ever really give a damn about people firing premium, but there you go, clearly they do. The OHO will get a premium AP, well, it doesn't say whether it's an AP, but they get a premium round for the 10cm gun. So basically that gives you an option to play with premium instead of having to fire the derp. So they didn't want people to fire premium against the Type 4 and Type 5, but they're giving the OHO premium. I'm sure there's a logic in there somewhere. OI, what I'm looking at here, this will get weaker rear armor to decrease the vehicle's dominance. So basically the back panel here goes from 170, so the back doors, basically where they load all the shells into the tank, or would have done if this thing ever existed, goes from 175 to 120. These rear panels here, 160 to 110, 150 to 105 on the sort of mudguard areas, and the lower plate of the back 180 to 125. I actually don't have a problem with this. I think all tanks should have weak sides and rears, or reasonably weak sides and rears, because that encourages people to actually play with a bit of mobility and a bit of common sense, get around behind. And the trouble with some of these Japanese obese tanks was you got around behind them and you still couldn't pen them even from behind. You had to get on the flat surface at the side usually to do anything. So yeah, that's a good one. This will get people very, very excited and unhappy. The OI experimental, so they're actually buffing the armor on this from 85 to 115 on the side of the turrets here, and on the frontal sections, these middle bits here, and the upper plate is going from 135 to 155. But before all you OI experimental drivers go jumping from the rafters, they're going to take away your derp. Yeah, sorry to tell you. The 105mm will be removed from this vehicle since it's too effective at tier 5, and the mobility of this tank will also be decreased. Now they've already nerfed the mobility once. I can't actually say I noticed it particularly, but then I have now sold my OI experimental, so I rely on people watching this to tell me whether or not they think this thing has been nerfed enough. I don't fear it as much as it once did, but I think it's a shame to take the derp off it. The derp is the feature for me of all the Japanese super obese tanks. and you take it away from the tanks at tier 5, but then they've got it every other tier. Seems a little bit harsh to me. But anyway, remember these are super test stats, so who knows whether they'll actually come into effect for real, but this is what the Daily Bounce is reporting, so it must be true. Well, Wargaming really love to cause a shitstorm, don't they? So, as I think I talked about in the last rambles, two new tanks coming to the game, tier 8 Japanese, a medium and a heavy tank, but only on the Southeast Asian server so far. We've been told that is all that's going to get it, and these are these special Valkyrie Chronicles tanks. So you have Nameless and the other one I've forgotten already what the other one is. But anyway, it doesn't matter because we won't see them on the European or the North American server anyway. So these are anime tanks. They were released last week, as I say, just on the Southeast Asian server. Nameless is completely OP from what I can see. I've seen some gameplay. Quickie Babe set up account and bought the pack and played it, and it just looked absolutely ridiculous. The medium tank isn't quite Edelweiss, that's it, isn't it? Wasn't quite so good, but still looked an interesting tank. Now, two things, possibly three things I have a problem with this tank is: one, what the fucking business, excuse my French, is a cartoon tank doing in the game, right? This is supposed to be a sort of semi-authentic, historic type war game, and they're going to stick something from a cartoon. I don't know anything about Valkyrie Chronicles, so forgive me if people are absolute advocates of this thing, but I'm sorry, these tanks have absolutely no business in this game. Absolutely no business whatsoever, and they should be. The shitstorm that happened when they did those stupid Trump wagon, the Patriot, and then the Liberté. You would have thought they'd learn, but no, it's money again, and this is some kind of deal they've done with Sega, who apparently created the game Valkyrie Chronicles, and these tanks are in it. So, so I do dearly hope they don't come to the EU server, well, certainly not the EU server because that's where I play, but any other server, because I think it's ridiculous. And then to bring in a tank that's OP as the Nameless one is, I mean, just completely OP. Now, the other thing they managed to screw up with this was what they didn't tell anybody, initially at least, is that these tanks came with special anime crew. So these come with a crew that already have brothers in arms attached. They are characters in the Valkyrie Chronicle. And what they neglected to tell anybody was that you can't actually move them out of these tanks. They are fixed. They cannot be moved. A bit like the dog on the Rudy, you can't take it out. Not unreasonably, a number of players went, well, hang on a minute, this is a premium tank and I can't train my Japanese crews in it. What the point of that then? And you've misinformed us, you missold it. So they basically had to backtrack like crazy. So this was the letter that they sent, and to their absolute credit, unlike with the Foshgate and all the shitstorm that happened around that, the Wargaming Asia responded really quickly and really well, I have to say. So they recognised that they'd ballsed up. First rule of crisis management. Remember I said this before. Crisis management. If you've screwed up, admit you've screwed up. Then tell people what you're going to do about it. They realised that they had screwed up because they hadn't told people that these crews were couldn't come out of the tank. And so what they've said is that if you purchase that tank before the 7th of June, 7 p.m. on the 19th of June, before they put up the notification or made it a bit more obvious, you have two options. You can either take a package of compensation, which is quite generous, lots of extra crew bonuses, bit of gold, some premium, or you can get a full refund on your package. And so good on them, I think. good on them for finally, for actually responding quickly on that. But frankly, guys, these two tanks should not be sold. This has no business in a sort of semi-authentic wargaming game. And I know this, just talked earlier on about these super obese Japanese tanks. I mean, none of which existed in reality. They're all paper drawings, and there are enough tanks in this game that are complete fantasy. We don't want real fantasy tanks, alright? At least there's some basis of historical accuracy on some of these tanks. These things are not, and I just think they should be removed from the game completely and never appeared and be burned and jumped up and down until they scream. I think that's balanced, don't you? So it looks like the next tech tree we will be getting into the game is the Polish one. This has been talked about, I think, off and on several occasions, but in Super Test at the moment is this new Polish vehicle, premium tier 6. It's called the Poodle, not to be confused with the dog variety, I think. Well, maybe it is, I don't know. But this is the Poodle. As you can see, it is actually a panther. It's basically supposed to simulate a captured Panther G. With this extra weathering to stop magmatic mines on the sides. It's actually quite a nice looking tank. So it's effectively a tier 6. It is a stock Panther, and it is Polish. So this will be coming into the line we're not sure exactly when, but at some point fairly soon. It's going through Super Tests, so we'll have to see what it changes, what it doesn't. But it looks quite a fun vehicle. 840 hit points, 75mm gun, firing AP and APCR, penetration 150, 194, 38, damage 135, 135, 175, reload time 4 seconds, rate of fire 14.9 rounds per minute, aim time 2.21 is excellent, damage per minute are really, really good, 2011. Accuracy 0.33 is not bad at all. Gun depression -8, very nice. Whole traverse speed 30 degrees per second is pretty reasonable. Top speed of 55 is nice, and 20 in reverse is also good. Ground resistances look pretty good. Armor's nothing special, but it is well angled. 85, 50, 40. Turret 100, 45, 45, which is pretty good. Power ratio of 15.8. So view range 370 is very good, and signal range nobody cares about. So it looks to be a very, very interesting tank. Looks very much like the VK3001P, is it? The prototype vehicle that's in the game already, which I actually really like as a tank. So this could be interesting. No idea exactly when we'll see this, but it's in Super Test, and so we'll have to see what comes out of it. But they have said on several occasions that the next tech tree will be Polish. There is a huge playing audience in Poland, and therefore bringing a tech tree to support that seems a logical way for wargaming to keep the interest in the game high in that country. So we'll see what it is. I mean, what will be interesting, what happens to the Rudy T-3485, because obviously that was a premium Russian tier 6 vehicle, was put in the tech tree on the Russian tech tree because there was nothing Polish wise, but it is actually from a Polish TV series, very, very popular, I believe, because of that. Very good tank actually as well, which is probably also why it was very popular. But be interesting to see whether they move that across. I did see a comment somewhere that they were debating whether to do it or not. They weren't sure, but if they did, they may offer options of either keeping it as a Soviet vehicle or moving it across to Polish. So anyway, but you know how it is with wargaming, they usually bring in a premium a patch or so before, sometimes 2 patches before the new tech tree comes in. So does that mean the Polish tree is fairly imminent? We will have to see. But another premium, it's just a clone. It's basically just like the standard tech tree tank, but made premium. Lazy from wargaming, but yeah, it seems the way it is at the moment, isn't it? Unfortunately, clones and clones happening into the game as a cheap way of making money off us. But hey, at least this one looks good. Yeah, I don't know. World of premiums, eh? Let me know what you think down below. Okay, so as we discussed in the last rambles, there's a new patch coming, sort of a semi-official patch, 919.1. It's not going to have massive changes in it, but there are some very, very interesting bits and bobs in it. So this is all being super tested at the moment. So again, with all super tests, you have to be conscious that some things will change. So first up, there's a new training ground. So this is basically training mode for players to improve their skills. Frankly, anything that improves people's ability when they pick up the game to know what they're doing has got to be a good thing, but I'm not convinced that you get enough bonuses to make it worthwhile people bothering to do it. Most players, I think, when they start the game, would rather go in and play the game, just dive in and screw it up for their team and for themselves and get bored and walk away, rather than actually play a tutorial properly, unless there's some decent rewards for doing so. And it doesn't have to be huge amounts, because we all know, if you can remember back to when you were having tier 1 and 2 tanks, even 20,000-30,000 credits was a massive amount. So these tutorials don't have to give you much, but I think they have to give you something to encourage players to play it, personally. So next thing they're looking to do is to make some changes to the matchmaker. Oh goody, my favourite. Matchmaking is so good in World of Tanks. I just still think it's got so much worse since 918. I won't be convinced. I'm still collecting all the data from my games. At some point when I've got the time, I'll work through it and present it here, and I'll probably have to eat humble pie. But what I have noticed is, definitely is happening, is that light tanks and artillery seem to get top tier much more often than heavy tanks and medium tanks. Have you noticed that? Just seems my way. Anyway, they're looking to balance things out a bit better. So apparently often what's been happening is one team will get a light tank at the top while the other team get it at the bottom. I've not noticed that particularly, but anyway, apparently that's a thing, so they're going to do that. Now the big one, big one, and fantastic, finally they listened to normal players instead of super unicorns. So they're testing the fact that artillery will be allowed to platoon again. Whoopee! So if your buddy is a budding artillery player, and you haven't been able to play with him for the last 6 months or so, if this patch comes in as they're talking about, you will be able to. However, only one artillery in the platoon, so you can't have all artillery platoons anymore. But at least having, being able to buddy up with somebody who's playing artillery, or I know people who I play with who quite enjoy just having a break sometimes and playing artillery just as a sort of bit of a let your hair down kind of thing. Well, so they won't have to leave the platoon anymore, they can stay on board, which is great. They're sorting the same level of technology in the player panel by class. What does that mean? Basically, I think it's just, again, part of this process of getting, making sure that it's marrying up properly. So you've got the same sort of heavy tanks, you've got the same sort of medium tanks, same sort of TDs, light tanks, artillery, evened out on each side, so it's no overbalance of everybody's got suddenly all the light tanks on one side, or the light heavier tanks, and then the other side's got mouse and governors, what else. So that's what they're looking to do. Improved crew stun mechanics, don't know what that is, we'll have to wait and see. Added a convenient drawing of a marker of allied artillery sight over objects and bridges. I'm guessing that's when you target a site, target an enemy, that's when it sort of shows up on the map to show your team where you're aiming, so that you won't run into that shell. That's being changed as well. Feedback, none of all this stuff really matters particularly. Lots of HD tanks coming through again, another 12 being turned into HD. I'm excited that the Jackson is finally going to be made into a HD model because it's one of my favourite tanks, and I look forward to see what they've done with it. They've obviously had some complaints about the women voices, so they're changing the dialects of the female Chinese voiceover. It's been completely rewritten in a new voice and a different dialect. Okay, Russian female voiceovers have been updated, some phrases have been reworked, so obviously she said something different. And numerous requests by players. The effects of the walkie-talkie for female voiceovers has been reworked, so now the girls' voices will sound much clearer and accented. Okay, if you say so. Not really noticed that being a problem to me, but obviously it was for somebody. Changes to the thing we'll talk about this in a second. Changes to the Chinese tier, a new tier 10 heavy coming into the game, which is interesting. WZ 1115A looks like a real doozy of a heavy tank, so that's coming into the game. The Tiger 217 has been added to the game client. We'll talk about this in a minute, but basically this is a clone again. This is another historic tank. It's based around a particular historical figure in the German army. It was his tank. It's basically like the Japanese tier 6 type 6 heavy tank, the early Tiger. So we'll have the 131, we'll have the 217, the Japanese Tiger, all basically identical tanks at the same tier, plus of course the Tiger 1 itself, and the Tiger and the Porsche Tiger as well. So yeah, they're not grabbing our money for nothing, are they? They've also added into the game files the new upcoming French premium TD, the Canon d'Assault 105. I'm guessing that means Assault Cannon 105. Just a guess. Polish line. We talked talks about the new Poodle. This is a tier 6 medium tank. It's actually supposed to represent a captured German Panther, and it looks pretty interesting, certainly at tier 6. So it's saying the Polish nation will not be added to the research tree. Well, clearly it will at some point, but just not in this patch or probably the next patch either. So that's interesting. But of course with that comes all the changes to, you have the Polish filter in it now, or you will do. You have Polish voices, you have lots of different things. Markers on the barrel will be different for that. So that's all cool. And they've given a couple of the top tier Chinese tanks a real buff. So they've increased the gun depression on the 121 from -3.5 degrees to -5 degrees, which is pretty good. And the 113 from -5 to a whopping -7. So that thing's going to be suddenly quite an effective tank. I never had a big issue with the gun depression. Occasionally it does catch you out in the Chinese tanks, so any gun depression is going to be good, right? But they're not changing the WZ-120, which is intriguing. So that's still going to have, I think it has -3 gun depression, something like that. Pretty damn awful. But interesting. All these tests, of course, all these things are obviously going through the test server. Super test. So we'll see what actually comes to the test server and then into the game for real. But interesting. So some of the other changes coming in 19.1, the sort of mini patch, is a change to the Chinese tech tree. So this is what it looks like currently down the heavy line. So you go from the medium type 58 into the IS2, the 110, the WZ-111, and onto the 113. That will change too. So this is how it will change. Much of the tech tree will remain the same, but from the WZ-111111111111114, you've got two options now for heavy. You can go for the 113, which has just been, or is about to be buffed in terms of gun depression and so forth, or this new tier 10 Chinese heavy tank, the WZ-1115A. which also looks like a complete joy to play. Actually looks like a really fun tank. So anyway, that's what they're doing with the tech tree. Interesting that they're just sticking one on the end. They didn't consider bringing in a whole new branch to lead into it. Maybe in time they'll split this off a bit more, because it's a slightly odd tech tree compared to some of the others. Hey ho, interesting new tier 10 though coming to the game. So as I mentioned in the notes for the upcoming game, patch that's coming, 9.19.1, there's a new premium German tank. This is the Otto Carius Tiger 1 Alf E217 tier 6 premium heavy tank, German of course. Now this is game files are going into the file in this patch. It's been super tested, so as ever these things, don't know why it needs super testing, because it's basically a Japanese Tiger or a Tiger 131 basically, but I suppose they've got to test these things out. You can see same pretty flat armor, same unmistakable outline of a German Tiger. It's a tier 6 premium, as I said, 950 hit points, has the short 88, which has a pretty respectable 145 penetration, 194 with premium, 44 HE, 220 average damage, 270 with HE, so that's pretty good. Reload time 6.7, which is pretty good as well. Rate of fire therefore is just under 9 rounds per minute, which is pretty good. 2.21 aim time is excellent, just shy of the 2000 DPM, 1966. 0.36 accuracy is not outstanding, but it's workable. Gun depression is brilliant, -8, and turret thrust 26 degrees per second. Top speed is 40, 12 in reverse is actually not bad. Armor is exactly the same as all the Tiger variants, 180-80, 180-80 on the turret. So yeah, view range 370, signal range 740. So do we really need another Tiger in the game? I don't know. I mean, there is some talk that this may well be a prize tank for completing some kind of mission, one of these ones where you have to do so much over the course of time. So if that's the case, then I can almost forgive it being another clone, but if it's not and it's being sold, then screw you, Wargaming. You're just being lazy now, not even generating new tanks. You're just reskinning old ones, sticking them out with a different name above the door. So but anyway, we shall see what comes out of it, but it's a nice looking tank, I'll give them that. So we'll see how this fits in, whether it is indeed some kind of mission reward or whether it is a proper battle tank. We'll have to take it and see what happens. So the updates to the personal missions they're looking for in 9.19.1 are, there's a multitude of them actually. So light tank 7 for the SPG hunter for the object 260. You've only got to spot, well now it's going to be spot 3 enemy and cause damage, destroying at least 1. So there's a raft. I won't go through them all, but lots of different changes coming to the missions, which is interesting. They're obviously looking at the data and seeing who's actually completing these things, and then if numbers are dropping, then they're going to tweak them a little bit to encourage people to try their hands at them. So basically light tank 7, medium tank 7, medium tank 8, medium tank 9, heavy tank 6, all have been amended in some form or another, so go and have a look at it. It's about time we had some new missions. I think that would be really, really good. So we talked about in the last rambles that a new American light tank, the T-92, had been spotted through actually one of the North American Wargaming North America videos. It was in the background apparently, so that was where it was originally spotted. It's going through super tests, so clearly they're playing with a lot, and there is now a stat card for it. It's a tier 8 light tank, apparently, from what this article here on the Daily Bounce talk about, it says it's sort of basically feels like a bulldog, that kind of thing, but with better, less mobility, but better gun stabilization while on the move. So it was originally super tested as a tier 7, but was seriously OP. So they bumped it up to tier 8, and it looks like it fits better in there. So interesting looking beastie. Quick look at it here. There we go. Classic light tank. Looks like a sort of T-71 really. 1000 hit points, has a 76mm gun that fires standard rounds of APCR. Heaters its premium, and HE of course. 175 average penetration with the APCR, 210 with the heat. Only 150 damage, but it's 13.9 rounds per minute. Aim time is an excellent 1.73. That seems to move away from what they've been talking about with light tanks to make them less accurate. That's got a hell of an accuracy. Mind you, the accuracy here is 0.36, so it's not brilliant. But damage per minute is a very, very healthy 2085. Obviously, that's without a decent crew, that's without any kind of equipment, so that will go through the roof. Gun depression minus 10, 55 degrees per second turret traverse, top speed of 60 is excellent. Good ground depressions as well. It's a light tank, so armor is nothing. 32 on the front, 29 on the front of the turret, and it gets a lot worse from there. Power ratio is 20, which is brilliant. It gets away from the lights really nicely. View range 370 base, and signal 740. So kind of an interesting little tank, this. Very interesting. So obviously this coming weekend is Tank Fest at Bovington Tank Museum, and to commemorate that or coincide with that, it looks like the Tiger 131 is coming to the PC. We'll find out more probably at the same time as this video goes up on Thursday. It'll be in the shop. I got I don't know whether anyone else did too, but I had an email from World of Tanks offering a discount. I think it was 20% off the cost of this tank, a tier 6 German premium tank, premium heavy tank obviously. Obviously I think it was 20% off the base price, but I don't know yet what the price will be, so we'll have to see and look with interest. But it's basically a Japanese heavy tank number 6, but in German colours. That's pretty much it, and it's got obviously a sort of rare colour scheme of its own, given the fact it's commemorating a historic vehicle, but it is just a clone. So we'll see what the price is like when it comes through. I won't be buying it unless there's any kind of bonus sharing with the Tank Museum or something charitable. Then I might be tempted, but otherwise not gonna bother. So I always love these sort of Q&As that you get from development team or community managers or what have you. It gives you good insight into what's going on in World of Tanks. So this was one reported in the Daily Bounce again. This is Raul Rule, Spanish community manager, answering some questions, and primarily this is around ranked battles and the special equipment that you get. So he was asked, if ranked battles succeed, will you consider implementing for other tiers like 8 and 6? And the answer was there's always space to tweak the mode. They're treating it very much as a beta, and at the end of the season they'll be looking at the data and seeing what they need to do with it. But currently there are no plans to expand the tier limitations. Oh, what a shame. We won't be able to fire gold at tier 6 and tier 8, whereas that's all that ever seems to happen in ranked battles. It says, although it's early to tell, don't you think the improved equipment will widen the gap between players? The answer, bury your head in the sand, of course not. We'll be looking at the data to make sure that they're not negatively impacting the balance. And then the question is, but only the best will be rewarded with enough bonds to afford this improved equipment. Won't they just unbalance the game, basically? And they've said that's why they're basically going to give them away other routes via specials and missions, and presumably buying them in the shop. So, you're not talented, but you can still buy them. That'll be a good thing. Well, that's not a problem, is it? Not a problem at all. Would it be possible to get bonds in other ways other than ranked battles? If so, how? And he said this is partially answered already. Definitely an option to get them in regular game modes for different missions and specials, but they want to keep an eye on the number of bonds in game in order to tweak the conditions accordingly. Another one is sometimes we get special equipment or consumables for special missions. Would that happen with the improved things? And the answer is we're looking to possibilities of the future, but no specific answer at this time. For the guys in North America, I think you've been experiencing some troubles with contact lists, and are they looking to fix that? Spanish guy says, I've no idea, it's just North America. Not my job, mate. Bit unfair, but that's basically what he says. They ask him what his personal opinion is about the personal improved equipment, and he ducks it completely by saying he thinks it's the same as playing with premium consumables. I feel better when I have them, but on the other hand I don't feel they're necessary to keep myself competitive. You must be very, very good or very, very bad, because anything that gives you a whole load of extra ability on every other player has got to be something every player will want, surely, huh? Last question was about what the general view of ranked battles and about the equipment is so far from feedback. The answer is we're getting positive feedback, but we need to improve the mode. This season was only a beta session and will show us the way to go in the future. The big issue for players are the rewards. The perception is that they're really negative. This was caused by a communication issue. We clearly didn't state the rewards are not ranked battle exclusive content at the very beginning. Okay, so basically people moaning that they don't get enough bonds, and they won't be only getting them just by spamming gold in ranked battles. Well, whatever. My opinion on the ranked battles, and I've stopped playing it, to be honest, because I find it just sucks my will to live, frankly. Selfish play, people spamming gold, desperate to get as much damage done as possible, but they'll hang around. So all the better players sort of sit on the baseline, wait to see how the game develops, watch their team either sacrifice or start to win, then they'll roll forward, blast everything they possibly can with gold, and because it's all about damage. It's all that matters is about causing as much damage as you possibly can, so that you finish in the top 3. Even if your team loses, you get bonds, basically. And I find it pretty turgid. Plus it's tier 10, and I think that's just a tier that I don't really particularly like anyway, so my view on it. So others might have different ones. They might even be right. So another quick historical link to the week we're in at the moment. So 22nd of June was actually one of the major landmarks of the Second World War. And this was the day when Germany launched Operation Barossa. And Barossa, as those who have any knowledge of history will be well aware of, was the Nazi German invasion of Russia. Took place 22nd of June 1941, and 1941 22nd of June was a Sunday, bizarrely, so there you go, interesting fact. So after several years of neutrality between the two countries, actually cooperation in some cases in Poland between Germany and Russia, Germany launched its long-anticipated attack. Well, I say long-anticipated. They had already said many occasions, Mein Kampf, Hitler had said about they needed Lebensraum, they needed space to expand. But still, the attack on Germany, on Russia, when it came, was a complete and utter surprise to them. And they launched it 3 main battle groups. Using the very same commanders that had been so successful in France in 1940. On the north, there was General Wilhelm von Liebe, who came from East Prussia and pushed up through the Baltic states. On the south was General Rundstad, with armoured group under von Kessel, who advanced south from Poland into the Ukraine and to Kiev. And in the centre, through the Pripyat marches, the main blow came from von Bock's army, with one battle group under the famous or infamous Guderian, and the other one under Hoff. And their objective was ultimately Moscow, to drive through the centre. And it was, early days of the attacks were stunningly successful. It was along a massive front. I mean, nothing has ever been seen on this scale before this. 1,800 mile front. And the Russians, even though it had been fairly well signalled for many years, had sort of lulled themselves into false sense of security, I guess, and were caught completely by surprise. And a lot of their units weren't in position, weren't mobilised properly, and within the first few days, Guderian's tanks were able to race 50 miles into the frontier and were at Minsk. And then by the 27th of June were 200 miles into the country. And what they effectively did was form pockets, cut off pockets of Russian resistance. You can see on this map, these sort of pinky colours were the pockets of resistance which they surrounded. And over the period of the first invasion of Russia, something like 300,000 prisoners were taken in this area alone. And the Russian defences were pretty much dismantled and overwhelmed by the blitzkrieg, the fast-moving German tanks, who didn't confront the Russians head-on. They worked around the flanks, they went for the rears, they broke up the supply lines, they encircled all the Russian formations, and used very close support aircraft to support them whenever they came up with strongholds. And they relied on truck-borne and in some cases horse and foot drawn infantry to dismantle these pockets of resistance, which is what they did. But the Russians, fought stubbornly. Isolated though they were, they resisted pretty much as long as they possibly could before finally surrendering, and huge numbers were taken. The sort of approach that the Russians took of scorched earth and refusing to withdraw slowly wore down the German attack, and so ultimately they were never able to make the ground that they needed to, and they were never able to get into Moscow proper. They got into the outskirts, but never actually managed to capture the capital of Moscow. And of course the rest is history. The front line eventually formed up somewhere around here, and it became a very stagnant war for a few years. Brutal conflict before finally the Russian counteroffensives started to work their magic and push the Germans back where they'd come from. But yeah, June 22nd 1941, that was the start of the war on the Eastern Front. Well, the Eastern Front, if you count the attack on Poland earlier, it started earlier, but in terms of the war between Russia and Germany, this started on the 22nd of June 1941, and was probably one of the most brutal conflicts there has ever been. Millions killed, millions made homeless, millions enslaved, atrocities on both sides, and just horrific fighting. But in terms of our game, let's belittle it completely, shall we? It opens up all the possibilities of all the new tanks that came along, which then come into our game and give us something to play with. But if we ever needed something to remind you that this is just a game, World of Tanks is just a game, just read some of the battles and atrocities that happened in this campaign and others in the Second World War, and nothing else needs to be said. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this rambles. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to the channel, please. And in the meantime, enjoy your games, have fun. Remember, it is just a game. And I'll see you again soon. Gamer Dom, out.